Hi, everybody. So this is video lecture number 2 for Unit 1. And today we're going to be talking about Learning Targets 1.2 and 1.3. So we're going to look at how geographers actually study the world, like what data are they actually looking at, collecting and using to draw conclusions about the world. And I'm going to move my face around kind of a lot, I'm sorry. You have to be able to, by the end of this video lecture, identify different methods of geographic data collection, and then explain how, once the data is collected, how decisions are made using the data. And that's kind of the gist of this. It's going to be a lot shorter than the last one, assuming I don't just chat and chat and chat. I'm going to try not to do that. Stay on point this time. So first and foremost, this is probably the most traditional type of data collection, and that's just field work. It's literally getting out into the field, talking to people or making observations firsthand about whatever it is that you're studying, and then recording the information. There's a really cool thing that we're going to look at when we get to the culture unit, where there's these linguists who are trying to preserve languages that are going extinct. And they're out there talking to some of the last speakers of some languages that are on the cusp of disappearing, and they are recording all of the languages, the words of the language, so that we have record of some of these spoken languages. So that's a really good example of some field work. Other examples include written accounts, travel narratives, media reports, policy documents, interviews, photographs. Landscape analysis is my personal favorite, but we'll get to that at the end of this presentation. Another example of where geographers get information that they use to make some really important decisions is, believe it or not, the US Census. We are in a census year. 2020 is a census year. Census happens every 10 years, I should say, and it's mandated by the Constitution, and it's a super important component of our democracy. So every 10 years, we ask questions of households in particular areas to see how many people are living in certain households, how many people have moved out of certain neighborhoods. So what we're really looking for is net in and net out migration, because the census helps determine like how many representatives you actually get as a district. So it's so super important to fill this out. I hope that you and your families have, because the other thing that the census is used for is public funding for schools, for law enforcement, for police departments. When communities grow, then money is funneled in to create highways or build up infrastructure. Governments and businesses use the census to determine, where is the best place to establish a business, or how can a government help a particular community that may need help because of growth or population growth or decline. And we're going to do like a little activity with the census tomorrow. Well, the next time I see you. Okay, so I'm going to skip the ed puzzle this time around and see how this works. So this is a place where I would like for you to pause the video and answer the question on the slide. It's the same thing that I would do in an ed puzzle, but since I'm hoping that you're taking notes on what it is that I'm talking about, it gives you some time to just kind of think about what I just discussed and then put that information in your own words. Also, this is helping you to make connections between this content and then the reading that you did as well. So you read about quantitative and qualitative data. So now I want you to apply that. Like, does the census collect quantitative or qualitative data? And if you're confused about this, then this is a really good opportunity for you to bring that to class and ask questions of me. So pause and think. Okay, now the kind of the big geographic tools that are like specific to geographers, and I guess other scientists as well, but these are the big ones for us, are those geospatial technologies, right? So we're talking about GIS, GPS, remote sensing, online mapping and visualization. That's all like the cool ways that we make maps. It used to be that cartographers would like hand draw these things. Now we don't do that anymore. And you'll understand why by the time I finish discussing this. So geospatial technologies are not, I suppose, just used by geographers, but they are like our babies. They're utilized by businesses, organizations, individuals, government agencies, again, all to help make decisions. So I'm going to go through each one by one. I don't know where best to put myself, so I'll just leave myself there. Geographic information systems, the way to remember GIS is the information, right? So this is the tool where you get to layer data. So you have a base map, and then there's something that it is that you might want to look at or examine in more detail. So you're creating these sort of thematic physical layers to help you understand some phenomenon that you're studying. So the exact definition is a computer system or software. I don't know where it is all stored. That stores, analyzes, and displays information from multiple digital maps. So you can actually go in and sort of build these maps from scratch because the data is there. And so then it's up to the geographer, whoever's looking at whatever it is that you're looking at. So effects of crime data or pollution or urban planning. All of those individuals would build these maps to draw conclusions about a specific place. So here's my example. So you might, this is GIS technology, by the way. So we actually use this more often than you may think. So here's Chicago. This is just a regular base map, right? It's just the street map view. But I can add a layer when I want to look at the satellite image. So this changes things a little bit. So I go from like seeing nothing but the street view to seeing where the vegetation is. And you can tell like the outline of Chicago, even though we're a pretty green city, it goes a little gray and concretey here. Whereas you get out into like the neighborhoods and you see more green space. And then say I'm hungry when I'm downtown Chicago, and I like this satellite image, and I kind of zoomed in a little bit so you can see Grant Park and some of the cool places right along the lakefront, and North Avenue Beach is like one of my favorite beaches. But I'm in the mood for some pizza, so I might just add another layer to my map where I might type in like best pizza in Chicago. You might notice that one of these pins is actually bigger than the rest because this is quite literally my favorite pizza place in all of Chicago. It's called Oven Grinders, and it doesn't actually serve pizza in the traditional way. Oven Grinders serves pizza. And then again, so now if I'm going to get there, I'll probably go back to the roadmap because it's a little easy to navigate. Look at like 4.6 out of 5 with 2,000 reviews. It's so good, you guys. But they make pizza pies there. So this is not a layer of the map. This is what the food looks like. So if you're ever downtown and you want to try something really cool, they actually bake the pizza upside down and then they like deliver it to your table and dump it over, and then you got this ooey gooey deliciousness. And so with the exception of all right, let me go back. With the exception of the pizza picture, all of the things that I just did was build different layers on a base map. So I'm using GIS technology there. I gotta get me some of this pizza. All right, now GPS is probably what you're all most familiar with. So this is, they call it now Satellite Navigational System. The name just changed, but ultimately it's GPS. And this is the thing that you use on your phones all the time. Like if you're going to your grandma's house or a friend's house, nobody reads a map anymore. You just pop that right into your phone, and then Google Maps takes you somewhere. They're using GPS. They're also using absolute location, right? They're using coordinates, latitude and longitude coordinates to get you where you're going. And so this is your navigational tool. Ships, cars, aircraft, everybody uses this. Aerial photography too, and this is kind of combined with the next one. So when we talk about remote sensing, we're also talking about aerial photography. So I'm just going to go to the next slide here. Remote sensing is the acquisition of data from satellites. So all of the things that we just talked about rely on remote satellites, or remote sensing, I'm sorry, and which relies on satellites. So these are cameras or other sensors that are mounted on aircrafts or satellites which orbit the Earth and just take a bunch of pictures, right? So if you want to see what's happening on the Earth's surface, this is especially a relevant tool for climate scientists who are monitoring environmental changes. So anytime you see images of the polar ice caps melting, which they are doing, those scientists are relying on remote sensing. So these sensors, they're these satellites that are just taking tons and tons of pictures. And so like weather and I guess environmental changing, again, these are like a pretty important, like, oh, there's like 2 hurricanes right now that are barreling toward, this is unprecedented, by the way. There's 2 hurricanes that are barreling towards Louisiana, like southern Louisiana, and they're scheduled to kind of meet up there. Who knows what that's going to look like? 2020. But satellites are watching those hurricanes right now and kind of calculating the spin and the movement, how fast they're going, how slow they're going. So natural disasters is like a really interesting, like it relies on this technology. So there was a huge tsunami. It was devastating actually in 2004 in most of Southeast Asia. So Thailand, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India was hit by this huge tsunami. And so you might see, like in this picture right here, this is before and this is after. So just by looking at these two images, you can kind of gauge like how devastating this tsunami was. Okay, another example of how we might use remote sensing is to gather information about countries that are really closed off to the United States, and there's no country more closed off than North Korea. So sometimes human rights organizations might use remote sensing to determine where, in this particular instance, a prison camp might be located. And so, like, I'm not going to read this to you, but if you want to pause and like learn a little bit more about what's happening in North Korea with all these like secret prison camps, I would encourage you to kind of read the slide. But we don't have to do that right now. All right, so another moment to pause and think. This time I want you to be able to tell me in your own words. So try not to go back to the slides. If you need to, you can, but in your own words, what's the difference between these um, three different, well, concepts actually. So what's the difference between remote sensing, satellite navigation, which is GPS, and GIS? And then what are some ways that this technology can be used? Okay, and last but certainly not least, this is my absolute favorite tool of geographers. I don't know why I enjoy it so much, but I love reading landscapes. I think it's because I really like to travel, and so I feel like this has always been like who I am. But landscape analysis is the task of defining and describing the land through observation, interpretation, and analysis. And really, why it's so interesting to me and fascinating and important is because you can tell a lot about a group of people just by looking at the things that they build. So, this is like the built environment as well. You can tell who we are. So, our regional identities, like it looks different in the Midwest than it looks in the West, and it looks on the East Coast than it looks in the South. um, what we value, how we change over time. So you might recognize that image that's on this slide, right? This is your community. It's pretty important thing to the community is the Fox River, and you see people use it for recreation. Of course, St. Charles was probably built on the river a long time ago because of the river. It provide access to trade. And if we don't use it too much for trade anymore, so that's that third bullet point, how we change over time. Now it's more recreational and just kind of pretty. I mean, they have running paths along the river. It's it is a fun thing to learn how to do that we are going to spend a lot of time with on in the culture unit. So I'm just going to pause it there. And then I want you to go ahead and pause and think again. Why is landscape analysis so important to geographers? And I think that's it.